So today we're going to talk about the muscles. And the first thing I'm going to do is introduce the model. And one of the things I would like to point out is that on this side, the right-hand side of the model, we have these superficial muscles. These are the muscles that you will see on the surface. On the left-hand side of the model, we have cut away some of these superficial muscles so that we can see muscles that are deeper to it. And so this is very evident when we turn it around. And we will see that on this side, we have our superficial muscles. On this side, we have our deep muscles. So we'll see that we have taken this muscle off on the left-hand side so that we can see what's underneath it. You can also see certain major landmarks, like this here is part of the scapula. And we have muscle attachments on the scapula, and we'll learn, for example, what these muscles are. And it's a good landmark to know that this is the spine of the scapula, or the scapular spine. So let's look quickly at some of the muscles that we're going to be studying for facial expression. We'll start with those. So the first one that we're going to look at is the frontalis. And the frontalis muscle is right here. Not surprisingly, it's right on the frontal bone. The next muscle that we're going to look at is the orbicularis oculi. And orbicularis, as the name sounds, is like orbit. Oculi orbits the eye. So the orbicularis oculi orbits the eye, and that would be this round muscle that surrounds the eye right here. The next muscle that we're going to look at is the orbicularis oris. And just as we had orbicularis, meaning to orbit, orbicularis oris is this muscle right here. So this is the muscle that surrounds the mouth. All right, the next muscle we're going to look at is called the buccinator. And the buccinator is a deep muscle, so we have to look at it on the left-hand side of the model. And that would be this muscle right here. So this is the buccinator muscle right here. The next muscle that we are going to look at is the zygomaticus. And since it's more superficial, we have to look on the right side of the model, and it is these two right here. We actually have a zygomaticus major and minor. You don't need to differentiate which is which, but we have the zygomaticus muscle right here, and you can see that it's attached to the zygomatic bone, not surprisingly. So we have our zygomaticus major and our zygomatic minor, but all you need to know is that this is a zygomaticus muscle right here. Next, moving on to the neck, we will look at the sternocleidomastoid, which is a superficial muscle, and as the name implies, is attached to the sternum, the clavicle, and the temporal bone on a region called the mastoid process. So this is the sternocleidomastoid. And if we look under the sternocleidomastoid on either side, that's the wrong muscle. Look under the sternocleidomastoid, we can see muscles of the neck called the scalene. So this is a scalene muscle right here under the sternocleidomastoid. Now we're going to look at one of the major muscles of the chest, and it is a superficial muscle, so we will look on the right-hand side of the model, and that is the pectoralis muscle. So this is the pectoralis muscle, the large muscle of the chest, and this, we have a pectoralis major, which is the one that we're interested in. There's also a minor, but that's not on your sheet, so we're going to focus on the pectoralis major here, and this is one of your muscles for bench press and push-ups and so forth. Now we can look at the shoulder muscles. Now the first shoulder muscle that I would like to show you is the deltoid, and that's what gives you that nice cap on your shoulder. We can look at the arm model as well, and we can see it here. So this is the deltoid muscle, and that would be the muscle of your shoulder, and these you'll use for things like pressing overhead, pressing forward, lateral raises, what we call deltoid raises for that reason. So this is the deltoid muscle. And the next muscle we're going to look at is the supraspinatus muscle. And going back to that scapular spine, the supraspinatus muscle is the muscle that is above the scapular spine, hence supraspinatus. And if we look at it on this model, we can actually take the deltoid off, and we can see the supraspinatus muscle here. And then the next muscle we have is below the scapular spine, called the infraspinatus, and that would be this muscle right here. You can also see it here on this model. So this is the infraspinatus, or below the scapular spine. We have one more muscle here in this region called the teres minor. So teres minor right here. You can also see it on this model. And the supraspinatus, the infraspinatus, the teres minor are all important muscles for the rotator cuff, which is a group of muscles that stabilizes the shoulder. And we have one more muscle that is part of the rotator cuff called the subscapularis, because it is under the scapula. And you really can't see it on this model because it is on the anterior surface of the scapula, so that would be this part. So this is the subscapularis muscle right here. So it is under the scapula. All right, the next muscles we're going to look at are the thigh muscles. And so now we'll come over to this model and get a leg up on everybody. And I'll put this model here. And the first muscle we're going to look at here is the iliopsoas. And the iliopsoas is really comprised of two muscles, the iliacus and the psoas muscle here. But we have the iliopsoas, this muscle right here. And not surprisingly, the iliacus, which is part of the iliopsoas, is on the interior surface of the ilium. The next muscle on our sheet is sartorius. And sartorius is this muscle that goes diagonally across the front of the leg. So this is our sartorius muscle right here. So this one. And then the next muscle on our sheet is the adductors, and there are actually several adductors. And we can see this is one of the adductors here. And here's one of our adductors. Here's another adductor. But these muscles on the interior of the thigh, you can also see one here. It's actually the same muscle. It's just if I remove this muscle here, you can see that this is the adductor on the interior part of the thigh. So this is the adductor group. Now the next muscle is going to be our biceps femoris. And our biceps femoris is back here. And we have, this is all part of the hamstring group back here. So all of this is part of the hamstring group. The biceps femoris is a part of the leg. So this is the biceps femoris right here. So this is on the posterior surface of the thigh. And this is the biceps femoris, and you can think of doing your leg exercises in which you curl your leg curls. That would be engaging the biceps femoris. And then we have the gluteus maximus, which is one of the largest muscles of the rear end. And of course, when you think of your gluteus maximus, you're thinking of things like doing squats. So squats engage the gluteus maximus. It is also one of the larger muscles, one of the largest muscles in the body. Now moving on down, we will look at muscles of mastication. I'm kind of reading down the sheet. So we'll look at the muscles of mastication. So we'll go back up to the face. And we will look first at the masseter. And the masseter is attached to the zygomatic arch and the mandible. And that would be this muscle right here. We have this great landmark, which is the parotid salivary gland. And this is the parotid duct. This will create saliva. And this duct is how it enters into the mouth. You can see the masseter here. You can see a little bit of the buccinator underneath it, but for the most part, the buccinator is covered by the masseter, which is a more superficial muscle, whereas the buccinator, easier to see on this side because it's deep. As I say, we're going back to our muscles of expression over here, of facial expression. When we talk about the buccinator, where's the masseter? We're thinking about chewing. Means chewing. So muscles of mastication are chewing muscles. Here's the temporalis here. The The temporalis muscle, not surprisingly, is on the temporal bone. So you can see a little bit of it on this side as well. Temporalis muscle. All right, so now let's go to the back. So the back muscles, we have two major muscles of the back that we need to know. One of which is called the trapezius, which is this diamond shape right here. And notice that we can only see half of it on this model because this is a superficial muscle. So it's on the right side of the model, but not on the left. They took it off on the left side so we could see what's underneath it. So this is the trapezius. And if we go to one of our smaller models, we can see the trapezius in its entirety. This is a very good model, but it shows only superficial muscles. The trapezius is this muscle right here. And you can see it's a very large muscle. And we can think of doing things like barbell shrugs with it. So this is the trapezius muscle. Then we have the latissimus dorsi, which would be this large muscle right here. You have it on both sides. So this is the latissimus dorsi, this is the latissimus dorsi. On this model, we can see it only on one side because they've cut part of it away on the left side. On the right side of the model, we see the latissimus dorsi, and this is what bodybuilders like to think of as their wings. So this would be that large muscle of the back and wraps sort of around the side as well. So now let's look at the abdominal muscles. So we'll go back to our model. And we can see what is called the rectus abdominis. And rectus means straight. So it's this long, large, straight muscle of the abdomen. We can see it here as well on this model. This whole muscle, the six-pack, is the rectus abdominis here. Now on either side, we have obliques. We have an internal and external oblique, and as the name implies, the obliques, the external oblique is on the outside, so we would see it on the right side of the model, the superficial side. So this is the external oblique, and the grain of the muscle runs at this 45-degree down angle, as though we're putting our hands in our pockets. So if you think about your external oblique, it's as though the grain of the muscle runs at a 45-degree down angle, as though you're putting your hands in your pocket. The internal oblique is going to be under this, so it's going to be deep to it. So we have to go back to this side of the model, and here is your internal oblique, and you will see that the grain of the muscle runs in the opposite direction, so at a 45-degree up angle. And you would not be able to see the internal oblique on a model that shows only superficial muscles because the external oblique muscles are the superficial muscles, and they will overlie the internal oblique. So the only way to see the internal oblique is to remove the external oblique. Now let's move on, and we will look at the biceps brachii. And biceps literally means two heads. So this muscle has two heads, and it is the main muscle that overlies the front of your arm. So this muscle right here, and you can see it on yourselves very easily, and this one has its attachment point on the shoulder and its insertion on the radius. And this muscle overlies another muscle, oh look, called the brachialis, and there's a label still on it. And this is the brachialis. You can see the brachialis covers up to about 2/3 of the humerus here. So all of this is the brachialis, and you can see part of the brachialis if we look at this sort of from a lateral view. You can see part of the brachialis right here. So this is the brachialis, and the biceps brachii overlies the brachialis muscle. Now we can also look at one other muscle of the arm, the triceps brachii, as the name implies. It has three heads. You can see two of them very nicely here. And these are the triceps, or this is part of the triceps brachii right here. So this part is on the posterior surface of the arm, and it makes sort of this horseshoe shape. For those of you who are into fitness and training, you know that you can make the sort of the horseshoe shape on the back of your arm when you flex your triceps. This is the triceps brachii. Now we're going to look at some of the leg muscles. So we will look at some of the leg muscles of the lower leg, and we're going to start with the calf muscle. So the big muscle on the back of the calf is called the gastrocnemius, spelled gastrocnemius. There's a C in it, but the C is not pronounced. Some people will say gastrocnemius so that they remember how to spell it, but that is the gastrocnemius. Then we have the soleus, which is right here. So this is the muscle that is just anterior and deep to the gastrocnemius. So if we take the gastrocnemius off, then we can see the soleus here. So all of this is the soleus. Now I'll put the gastrocnemius back on, and then we can look at the fibularis muscle, which, as the name implies, it goes right down the length of the fibula. And remember, our fibula is that lateral bone of the lower leg. So the fibularis runs right down the side of the fibula. Then we have the extensor digitorum. And the extensor digitorum is here, and it runs all the way down into the foot. So the extensor digitorum is right here, and you can see that it connects down into the foot area. And then we're going to have the tibialis anterior. And remember, the tibia is the large bone, the medial bone of the lower leg. So the tibialis anterior is that muscle right there. And you can see it on yourselves. You can actually make it pop out. If you dorsiflex your foot, you can make that muscle pop out. And you can actually see along the anterior margin of the tibia. Now there's a nice acronym we can use to remember these muscles. If we go anterior to posterior, we can teach every friend something good. Tibialis anterior, extensor digitorum, fibularis, soleus, and gastrocnemius. And that concludes our demonstration of the muscles.